Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Our first speaker today is Maggie Dieringer. Maggie is a detail-forward creative thinker with a passion for connecting people and processes. As a design operations lead at Uber Eats, Maggie supports large programs across a variety of verticals and has a scalable, systems-based approach to operational challenges. Over the last 4 years, Maggie helped grow the design program management function at Uber from the ground up. And this morning, she'll be sharing her experience, learnings, and observations. Please welcome Maggie Dieringer.
Thank you, Frances. I am going to share my screen. Here we are. All right. All right. Hi, everyone. So my name is Maggie Dieringer, and today I'll be talking through DesignOps layers of impact and my observations on moving from tactical to strategic. I know that I am speaking to a wide range of folks today across many disciplines, but my point of view will be mine from my experiences as a design program manager. So while this talk is catered to DesignOps folks, I do hope that design leaders and designers, content designers, researchers may also learn a bit about how your DPM may be working and the many factors that influence our work day to day. So before I jump in, a little bit of background on me. I started out my career on the agency side in Portland, Oregon, and then moved to San Francisco and worked in account management and project management across a few different agencies. And a little over 5 years ago, I moved over to the brand team at Uber as a producer. I then transferred to the product design team and have since helped grow and define the design operations function for Uber Design. And I've worked both on the driver and rider businesses and have most recently been working on our delivery business on the Eats side since around the start of the pandemic. As you can imagine, the delivery business blew up. So that's been about the last 2 years. So while I've been working with designers and engineers and product folks for about 9 years, I've officially been in a design ops role for about 4.5 years. So a little bit more context about why I wanted to give this talk is that I've moved through my DesOps career at Uber, and my job has changed so much each year because of so many different influences. And when looking at these 4 dimensions of job fulfillment, usefulness, respect, growth, and inspiration, the times when I've enjoyed my job the most is when I felt useful and respected in my role. And that got me thinking a bit, since my time as a DesOps practitioner, when have I personally felt that? And what are the contributing factors that have allowed me to move from work that was dull or unrewarding to work that kept me feeling useful and respected? And what could I do and what could my team do to remain at the company happy with the work that we were doing? So how can we ensure that our team is feeling the most rewarding parts of their job throughout any given week? And as we go through some of these examples throughout this presentation, I'd like you to think, which of these matter to you and where can you or your team find fulfillment? Setting a bit of context, when I started at Uber, DPMs were in charge of everything, and there were only a couple of us. So we handled bits and pieces of every area in the green boxes you see here, across design ops, portfolio planning, roadmap management, comms and events, modeling, tracking, reporting, finance and growth, learning and development. Now our team's grown a lot and it's actually fluctuated up and down quite a bit in size and structure, but we've really remained strong at our core. So we now have 6 people who focus on team ops as well as research ops, 12 product DPMs spanning all of our different product portfolios, and 4 folks in our exec and strategy team. And our design ops practitioners are globally distributed across 5 offices, which you can see here on the map. So we have people across all of these 3 teams now doing all of those things in the green boxes that you saw before that were typically handled by a couple folks. And during a recent workshop for our team, one of our DPMs ran a 16 personalities test across our DPM team to see where we all landed. And we actually ended up having a pretty diverse set of folks. So we had architects, logicians, debaters, advocates, protagonists, defenders, etc. And while there's a lot of similarities in a lot of these buckets, it really exposed how different we all are, which means that we can't all work the same way and we shouldn't all be working the same way. And this is how I feel that we've really actually been able to successfully support the ever-changing needs of the teams we work with. So shout out to all my ENFJ protagonists out there in the audience. So again, there is no one size fits all way for DPM to operate. And even within our organization, we're all changing and we're all malleable pending our surrounding influences. And I think this has allowed me to see that there are many paths to take that can include scaling yourself, your team, and the teams you support. So in the next 30 minutes, I'll walk you through how we might look at framing and scaling the DPM role around some activities you and your team want to be doing based on various framing factors, how some of those have been able to increase DPM influence on the teams I've supported at various levels, and how these might help you look at DPM growth within an organization and look at DPM trajectory opportunities. And my goal is to speak from my experience in having been at this company with DesignOps as one of our first DPMs and seeing the organization ebb and flow, and also seeing 3 different parts of our business who are all at different stages. And I don't necessarily want to cover where I believe DesOps is going or should be moving towards, but instead give you my observations in the case it may help you understand where your org is at right now and help you think through similar problems you might be facing. So to summarize, how you frame and scale the DPM role around your needs based on where your org is at can help increase DPM impact and therefore support varying DPM trajectories within your organization to support the many different folks you might have. So to start off, ask yourself and your team, where is your time best spent and how do you ensure that you are having the most impact with that time? So we throw out these words really often, tactical, strategic, but what do they actually mean as a DPM and how do you talk about them with your teams? The reality is probably that we are all tactical and strategic in our day-to-day, and it really helps define what the team needs at any given point. So I think a lot of us live here in the center with a slight propensity towards one side or the other based on what might fulfill you in your job and your individual skill set. So this summary here is by no means inclusive of everything you'll see. And we'll talk through about a lot more activities throughout this deck, but this list specifically draws some contrast for basic activities on both the tactical and strategic side of things. And when I started out in this role, I was definitely a little bit more tactical on this left side and focused a lot of my time on things because that's the baseline of what the team needed. And I worked on things like design tool implementation, project tracking tool implementation, resourcing visibility, team and culture building events, team cadence, et cetera. And when I joined the EATS team a couple of years ago, the team was a lot larger, closer to 40 people. And so my focus naturally had to be very different and zoomed out. We had intense layoffs, as a lot of companies did during the pandemic, and I was the only DPM on that team for only a year. But I was able to use that to my advantage to kind of choose the core priorities I wanted to focus on. And I often ask myself, does this activity support what the team needs now in this moment? And could it also help push my career in the direction that I wanted? So I believe there is no right or single way to operate, but instead that we should frame our work so we focus on impact. So this statement is actually part of our principles on how we prioritize work for our design team, but I think it applies directly to how we work as DesignOps as well. Our success is based on the impact our work has on product, business, design, and customer experiences. And this impact might be organizational, strategic, or executional. So with that, let's get into it. So when looking at how DPMs show up at work, there are 3 framing factors I've considered in each of my teams that I've worked on and managed. And there's obviously more, but today we're going to focus on these 3 because I've found them to have the most impact in my day-to-day. So 1 is how big is the design team and what state is the org in? 2 is what type of resourcing and allocation environment are we operating in? And 3, what level is my main design partner? So at any given time, I believe these are all levers and controls you can use for yourself and your path to an ideal state of operating. And these are all things we think about how to improve daily and things that I've looked at for my own growth and development over the last 4.5 years. So my goal today, as I mentioned, is to show you where I have leaned in at different stages and where these factors have had varying levels of influence. And I hope it can help you think through what may or may not work for your team. So the first framing factor is size and state of the design org. So state referring to how long has the team existed, how mature are the processes and business, how mature is the business of the org. And that's not just within design, but also cross-functionally. And then the size, pretty straightforward. How big is the design team or area you are supporting? And One thing I do want to call out when I do talk about design throughout this presentation, I'm talking about design with a capital D, as we support content designers, researchers, and product designers as DPMs at Uber. So the first thing to consider is the level of maturity the organization is at and the state it is in. So when I say organizational maturity, I'm talking about the team as a whole. How long has the team been around? What external events may have impacted the way the whole team, including cross-functional partners, operates? And depending where your team is at on the spectrum, you might be doing very different things. So if it is a newer and nascent org, you're likely spending more time trying to figure out what processes and frameworks need to be implemented net new and the surrounding work to accompany that. So you'll be doing things like assessing which processes are in place, potentially implementing new product development and design processes, defining very simply how we track work. And I mentioned earlier, design tool selection, and a lot of upfront relationship building with stakeholders who might not know actually how to work with design, and especially might not know how to work with design operations. So if your organization is a bit more mature and has been around and it's a more established team, you might be spending a lot of time either redoing what was done previously to accommodate the evolution of the team, or iterating and evangelizing existing processes and frameworks as the team has grown, changed, and new people have joined. So a couple activities on this side: cleaning up old trackers, iterating on existing frameworks and processes, evangelization of existing process or framework work that was done previously. Maybe you're zooming out a bit and focusing on cross-team collaboration improvements, or just maintaining support on existing product development processes. So the state of the org, I think, can be used to really drive the right setup as well. So if an established org is running in a way you don't necessarily agree with, or is maybe no longer appropriate for where the team is at now, most of your time might be spent, uprooting and resetting with partners, stakeholders, and the team on the type of design culture and the new way that you want to work. But when you have a completely clean slate with a new team or new organization, you have a bit more flexibility to define what you want to do, but maybe not as much structure. So when looking at the people you're hiring or where you want to place people on your team, consider heavily their strengths, and can they operate in ambiguity, or might they better operate in a world that is already set up for them? At Uber, we've definitely had teams at every different stage, and we've had to do a little bit of combination of all of these. So the next area within this framing factor of the design org is size. So is your org 10 to 15 people? Is it 30 to 50? Maybe it's smaller, bigger, something in between. How many people are actually a part of the direct team that you are supporting? I think the industry standard says that there is a desired ratio of 1 DPM to a design team of 10 to 15, but that's not always the reality for many folks. But again, you can use the size of your team to your advantage to prioritize the work that you and your team would like to be focusing on. So on the left side here, in a smaller team with maybe a more aligned ratio of DPM to design, you might have the bandwidth to do some of these activities. So you're looking at meeting with IC designers daily, managing closely and running team meetings, so crits, stand-ups, design weeklies, jams, sprints. Maybe you're going to most design reviews and actually actively contributing. You're diving deep into one space and you know the work really well, so you can prioritize and sequence it, and you're actually managing those trade-off discussions on a weekly basis and onboarding new folks on how to work with you. On a larger team with the same amount of DPMs, you might need to adjust your cadence and engagement. So meeting with ICs monthly, maybe you're more partnering with the managers and going to crits every couple months to see what's going on and identify kind of these cross-team engagements and help connecting the dots. And you're really optimizing collaboration across the team at a macro level and focusing on scaling your work to other teams. So the size of the team you support has a really strong impact too on what level you're managing the work at, and inherently supporting 30 to 50 people, you're not able to be as deep into projects as you would be with 10 to 15. So we try to kind of keep this in mind as DPMs, regardless of the state of the organization or the team size. We really meet our teams where they're at and ensure that we have the right setup to accommodate both nascent and established teams of all shapes and sizes. So the second framing factor to consider in this context is design team resourcing. So the way you set up your engagement and staffing model, as well as the allocation and organizational strategy, can have an immense impact on how DesignOps can and will lean in. So first in this area is the staffing model. So which staffing model does the team operate in, or what type of staffing model are you working towards? And I'm not expressing one view or another about which model is better, because it fully depends on, like I said earlier, many organizational decisions that you might not have an influence on as a DPM, and sometimes external influence out of your control that might make your team kind of lean one way or the other. So at Uber, I've supported teams at every different level of this spectrum, a more flexible and fungible model, a hybrid somewhere in the middle, and then also a more dedicated model. So in a more flexibly staffed environment, some of the activities you might be doing are being able to actually speak to project level dependencies. You might be focusing a bit more on daily prioritization and stack ranking the work because folks are moving around a lot. If there's an imbalance of PM to design, you're having to make trade-offs almost on a daily basis often. It's a lot of resource management. You're looking at a lot of intake constantly, requests that are coming in off plan. And for us, it was a lot of negotiating with other teams. How can we, staff the most important work and borrow designers to staff that work, and ensuring there's no timeline conflicts with their other work, and also escalating staffing gaps that might be coming up. And in a more dedicated model, you're spending a bit more time kind of focusing holistically what the team needs, maybe not just one area. And you're looking at recruiting and what's the shape of the org. You're kind of defining the engagement model at the macro level, or deduplicating roadmaps across the whole team, helping PMs connect the dots for subsets of the roadmap. And I think we've spent a little bit less time. We're definitely more in this model right now on the EATS team, and there's a heavy lift during the planning cycle, but the day-to-day resourcing, we really work with our DMs on and let them be those decision makers day to day. So also when we're evaluating design team resourcing, we need to look at the reality of the allocation of the team. So are we constrained or are we in growth mode? So I know many teams out there feel like design is always operating in a bit of a deficit. I know for me personally, a lot of my time, we have operated in a constrained model due to various reasons, but now we're definitely again in growth mode, and that has changed how I work with our teams and the evolution of our kind of staffing and engagement model. So on the left side here, in a super constrained world, a lot of these activities are similar to the previous slide, but you are doing a lot more resource management. You might be saying no, but here's a solution for you. So one thing we've done is created new processes to cover more work with fewer people. So implementing, content design office hours where people can bring their work to our content team, or self-service UXR. What does that program look like for people to run research on their own, because our team is a lot more lean. And then these kind of middle areas were highlighted in the last slide, but you're rigorously intaking PM roadmaps, stack ranking, collecting timelines, and a lot of reprioritization happening as new things come up. And then when you're in growth mode, where you're actively hiring and maybe a bit better able to staff the work on a consistent basis, I found myself focusing on a bit more of headcount strategy and helping our leaders develop the growth narrative for the team. Standardizing and improving onboarding templates. So as we're hiring a lot more folks, what does our onboarding process look like, and how do we make sure that that's the smoothest experience for our candidates? Providing tools, templates, and education on how to sequence and prioritize your work as a designer, versus us doing it for them. We've really been able to lean in on the future of the org vision exercises, and also coordinating more tools and workshops on really how to manage work for our ICs. So the reality is most organizations and teams will fluctuate, and you need to know how to flex into both of these areas. And that's one thing I've felt grateful for, having the experience in both. And it's not always going to be one way or the other, but I think the ability to understand where the team is at resourcing wise and really be able to lean in can help you as a DPM. So regardless of your engagement and allocation models, it has been helpful for us to keep this in mind. So we value reciprocal engagements and partnerships and teams that act on our work. And we look at this across design, but also for DPMs. And it's for us really important for us to remember, regardless of if you're in a flexible or dedicated model, if you're in a constrained world or in growth mode, if you keep this in mind in each of these resourcing spectrums, you can really help direct your team on where to focus energy. And the third and final factor that I'm going to talk through is the level of partnership. So at each stage of my ever-changing journey as a DPM at Uber, I've partnered with directors who pull me in to lead strategic conversations with senior leaders at the company, as well as managers who ask me to plan team events or schedule meetings for them and everything in between. So this section looks at what level you're partnering at and what is their familiarity with a DPM role. So I believe if you hire the right person at any level, they can have an effective partnership with any partner. As a junior DPM, just starting out in the function, I was working with 3 design managers as well as a director because at the time, that was what the team needed. And I've had a couple of advocates who have helped me level up as a key decision maker and driver in meeting rooms full of senior product stakeholders, even when I was junior. And that helped me build a strong relationship and confidence in my role. And as I progressed in my career, I found it most valuable and rewarding for me personally to have the primary partnership with a director and a secondary partnership in cadence with their direct reports. So design managers, UXR managers, content design managers, design leads. But that might not be what everyone wants. That has worked for me, but that might not be what your team needs or wants. So when partnering at the design manager level, look at those activities and where your focus is. It might be generally a bit more narrow into a specific area. So you're acting as a proxy to the design manager. You're answering questions about design priorities, team strategy, hiring in the absence of the DM. You're assisting them with load balancing. You're really focused, maybe honed in on that narrow areas, team health, providing direction again, how to work with design, who to go to with what work, and connecting dots between projects. And then also connecting with ICs on an individual basis and really digging into what's going well, where they're struggling, and what they want to see from the leadership team. And then on the other side of the spectrum, and again, all of these, have kind of a middle ground, and there might be a combination. But when you're looking at the other side, so when partnering at the director level, I found I spend a lot more time organizing our leadership team and keeping us accountable to the bigger team narrative, vision, and goals. So you're looking more broadly at many areas and how the work you're doing fits into the bigger organizational strategy versus an area strategy. And then you're really seeing the world through the lens of the director's eyes and their cross-functional partnerships. And you might be doing more things that seem similar to this. So like I said, organizing a leadership team around many initiatives, keeping managers accountable and on track to team-wide initiatives, escalating key information and challenges to Director Plus, providing recommendations on how to solve escalations, and then just really partnering with them on anything around team concerns, flight risks, health issues, and what the solution might be. And then also really focusing on cross-team project priorities versus area priorities. So as we were able to prove out the DesOps function and grow the team at Uber, we were really able to start thinking about what level of partnership each DPM should have. And it's still a work in progress for sure. But perhaps some folks on your team might prefer getting more in the weeds and working closely with the ICs and DMs. And that's what gives them that day-to-day job fulfillment. So ask them and yourself these questions. What does the most effective type of partnership look like for you right now? How might we leverage you and your partner's complementary skills to create something that works for the team you are supporting today? So not where we were in early 2020 or late last year. What does the team need today, and how can you two together, or 3 or 4, support that as a team? And then the other area within the level of partnership is your partner's understanding of DesignOps and their previous exposure. So if your partner doesn't know how to leverage you, you can often get sucked into potentially negative habits based on what they need personally. And while you want to be a team player, you also want a partner who makes you feel useful and respected, can help you grow, and if you're lucky, maybe inspires you too. And I've worked with a handful of leaders who have never had exposure to DesignOps, and there is a bit of groundwork you need to do to set those expectations. So even if DesignOps has been at the company for a while, each time you enter a new relationship with a design partner, you should also productively align on what you do and do not work on, and roles and responsibilities between the two of you. And I found success in doing this, even with a simple 1 or 2 hour post-it workshop around roles and responsibilities. And that process also allows you to build trust with your partner. And in the future, as needed, you can point back to that documentation when things pop up and you need clarity on, what you had agreed upon within the partnership. In my opinion, that's where the most successful relationships are too, regardless of exposure to DPM. So on this left side, for folks who may not have worked with a DPM before or are unfamiliar with the role, like I said, there's a bit of work up front to be doing around setting roles and responsibilities, workshopping what your desired working model is, proactively ensuring that you're involved in comms, meeting decisions. You can't expect that they're just automatically going to know when to include you. So there is a bit of legwork to do in really putting yourself at the forefront of everything they're involved in. So like I said earlier, you can be a proxy to them and vice versa. There is a bit of debunking, at least in my experience. I don't know if everyone has this, but debunking confusion with the EA role. For someone who doesn't know, you might get a lot of meeting requests or admin tasks. So again, in that first workshop, point back to the roles and responsibilities of what you do and do not do. And then the other great thing actually about somebody who might be unfamiliar with this is you have a clean slate to really define that relationship for someone who's coming in with expectations that might not be fully aligned with what you want to be doing. So on the right side over here, when partnering with someone who's maybe on the ops expert side, a lot less time needs to be spent upfront on education, and you can really jump in together on what DesignOps priorities should be. So you might be spending more time together, setting the vision for the team, co-designing processes and frameworks, looking at team offsites or virtual summits, strategic team-wide initiatives. You have a lot of autonomy to run with team-wide projects. There might be some time spent in career development frameworks, and then also scaling processes and practices that have already been implemented. They can really help you push through this, and they understand your world a lot. So it's really easy to kind of just jump right into process and framework definition. So no matter what level you are or what level your partner is, you should be considered strategic partners to UX directors, DMs, designers, UXRs, UXR managers, and content design teams. So regardless of level and engagement, we are all strategic partners to each of these folks. So I just walked you through those 3 framing factors that I've seen impact my day-to-day work at Uber. And I think these factors can lead you to kind of make a decision around how you want to define the shape of the DesignOps organization. And what is the desired level of engagement for you and your team? So if these 3 framing factors influence how you're working each day, how might you use them to support the narrative of where your team could grow, scale, and shift? So having more people might allow you to do a lot more of the activities you saw in the previous slides on the left side of the spectrum, and maybe less of those on the right, and that's okay. Where I'm at now, myself and one other DPM have been working to scale ourselves by finding ways for others to take our frameworks and self-serve, therefore allowing us to prioritize the most important work for the org we're seeing right now. So we are still working through this as a team, and we definitely don't have it all figured out, but I often do ask myself, if there are 5 of us instead of 2, how does our work change? So when I joined the team in 2018, there were 11 designers and I was 1 DPM, and I was able to get really in the weeds of the work and understand everything they were working on each week, attend crits, attend every design review, all these activities you see on the left, while also supporting a bit of org-wide thinking. And that's what the team needed at the time. And then now I support around 40 folks with one other DPM, and I cannot be in the weeds day to day. And 80% of my work is partnering with our design leaders to keep us organized and thoughtful about how we approach problems at the macro level and how our thinking can scale to our extended design team and other areas and portfolios. So perhaps in one org, being more tactical 1 month is actually more influential, while spending time on team-wide structural frameworks the next month is actually going to elevate your influence. So do you and your reports and peers want to be in the weeds and know one area very deeply in a zoomed in way, or would you thrive more in a zoomed out view into the team portfolio area you are supporting, or be somewhere in the middle? So the size of your DPM team impacts that. I think you should use it. So we use our size to help drive the desired DPM engagement. And at one point I thought I just wanted to hire and make sure every area was covered. But then I took a step back and really thought through, what are the goals of my team? What are my personal goals? And how do I ensure that there's room for growth for those below me, knowing that the current state of our DesignOps, and our design teams. So my advice is be picky with how you want to work, what level you want to operate at, while still also addressing the needs and requests of the team. So I'm going to wrap this up here, that I really believe that we can cater our career and growth to what we want and like to do, even if it feels we're hitting a lot of obstacles, all while still supporting the needs of the organization. So what that might mean for DPM growth in your team. I ask these questions often, and if you aren't asking yourself these questions, I think the risk is that you default to what you're comfortable with, or you default to what was done before, which may not be right for where the team is at right now. So which activities and environments bring me job fulfillment day to day? Which activities will have the most influence and impact right now on the team I support? How can I leverage my partner to work on the things that are important to my career? How can I use my team size to influence the desired behavior and engagement? And do I thrive doing tactical or strategic activities, or both? So I'll leave you with this summary and a little activity. Feel free to screenshot this, but plot where you think you can have the most impact, giving these 3 framing factors. So where are you today in terms of the activities we talked about on each of these spectrums? Where do you want to be? And where does your team want to be? Thank you all for listening today and waking up early or staying up late with me. And feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. We can have a chat. I know we only have a couple minutes left, so definitely open to folks pinging me questions on LinkedIn since we don't have much time.
Yes, this was really awesome. Thank you so much for your presentation. We do have a short amount of time to ask questions, so I want to see basically, with what you just showed us, how can smaller teams move forward with DesignOps? And for small scale teams, of the things that you just showed on screen, what would you recommend small teams focus on first?
So I'm just going to rephrase the question back to you. So the question was, for smaller teams who might not be working with a larger organization, where should they start, essentially?
Yes.
Yeah. So I personally feel that, I don't know, it kind of totally depends on the org that you're working within. So my biggest recommendation would be interview your team, start there, see what you feel their needs are at that moment, because they might need maybe something that's a bit more strategic and impacting the org as a whole. They also might need you to just jump in and clean up their systems, clean up their tools, make sure that everyone's using the same project management and resourcing tools so that they have visibility. I don't think that there's necessarily one activity that every team should start with, other than making sure you're interviewing each person on your team and asking what their pain points are, because then I think that can help you determine, oh, does this team need a bit of more like high level support and a strategic overhaul, or do they really just need me to get in the weeds and clean things up and do everything that you kind of saw on the left side of the screen in each of those areas.
Perfect. I think that's all the time we have for questions. I know you have to jet, so thank you again so much for your time.